Almost a century ago, in 1926, the 15th year of the Taisho era, a man who came to be known in the media as Onikuma took 4 lives and went on the run. What makes this case interesting, however, was that Onikuma was so well liked by his fellow villagers that they actually helped him hide from police and fed them false information to help facilitate his escape. But what drove Onikuma to commit the acts he did, and why did the villagers help him? The man who would later come to be known as Onikuma was born Iwabuchi Kumajiro in 1892. Exact date of birth unknown. He was born to a poor family and reportedly left school after the 4th grade, leaving him unable to read or write. He began work for a local landowner as a farmer at the age of 12, and then, when he was 27, he switched to using his strength for cart pulling instead. He carried felled trees into town for lumber and distributed fertilizer as well. Iwabuchi was also massively popular around town. He was a hard-working man who never missed a day of work, rain, hail, or shine, and he was always happy to lend a hand to whoever needed it. Although being small in stature, 155 centimeters tall, Iwabuchi was an incredibly strong man, and he took it upon himself to always help those weaker than him, taking particularly good care of the sick and elderly. He was also well liked amongst other cart pullers due to his genial nature. He helped out new recruits and was always happy to share a drink. He could reportedly drink almost 4 liters of sake in a single sitting. Iwabuchi was affectionately known as Kuma-san. Kuma, of course, came from his name, but also meant bear. Because of his strong drinking ability and the fact he tended to carry around giant bales of rice, weighing roughly 60 kilograms each, on each shoulder. But if Iwabuchi had one thing going against him, it was his love of women. He was married with 5 children, but this didn't stop him from constant dalliances with other women in the village. Single or married, it didn't matter to Iwabuchi. Once he set his eyes on a woman, he would have her, and many were happy to spend their time with him as well. But the times being what they were, many of these relationships ended quite messily, and in the end, that was what would cause Iwabuchi's downfall. When he was 34, Iwabuchi met a woman by the name of Ohana. Ohana was 28 and married, but had been sold to an inn because of a large debt she owed and couldn't pay back. Iwabuchi naturally felt bad for the woman, and it wasn't long until those feelings changed into something more. He decided that he would take care of her as well, and in order to do so, he would need to pay off her debt. However, this debt was no small amount. It was 50 yen, which, at the time, was roughly a graduate's starting salary. Iwabuchi was born poor, and at the time, was also taking care of a family of 6. 7, including himself. Where on earth was he supposed to find that kind of money to help this woman who was sold because of her debt? There was only one thing Iwabuchi could do, short of turning to robbery. He sold the family's one and only horse and paid off Ohana's debt. But he didn't stop there. He separated Ohana from her husband and found her a new place to live. He wasn't exactly made of money though, so he relied on friends to pull this off, eventually putting her up in the inn of a couple he knew. But soon this relationship soured as well. Iwabuchi went to visit Ohana every night, and this put a strain on his friends running the inn. They also didn't want to keep this woman they barely knew living in their inn forever, and so both parties soon had a falling out. Ohana had to find a new place to live. Iwabuchi asked another friend who ran a variety store to take her in, and he did. But unlike the couple running the inn, this friend steadfastly refused to allow Iwabuchi to visit his house and see Ohana each and every night. And as a result, Ohana left after roughly a week and returned to her husband. Iwabuchi paid off her debt and tried to remove her from the husband who sold her, and yet in the end she returned to him anyway. He was heartbroken, but that wasn't yet the worst of it. Iwabuchi soon learnt several horrifying truths. First, the friends he had asked to put up Ohana were actually working with Ohana's husband. They were all in on it, and the plan was for her to return to her husband all along. Second, Ohana had no debt. She, and by extension the rest of them, had swindled him of the 50 yen. Iwabuchi's heartbreak turned to rage. Not only had the woman he was trying to help betrayed him, but those he thought were his friends as well. He had been played on all sides, and that hatred would continue to grow. Before long, Iwabuchi met another woman, this one by the name of Oke. She was only 23 years old and incredibly pleasing to the eye, to say the least. The pair soon began a relationship, and Iwabuchi was helpless to her whims. When she wanted money, he gave it to her, and he constantly showered her with gifts. Whatever it took to keep her happy. And it was, perhaps, a way to get his mind off the betrayal of Ohana. But again, Iwabuchi was not very well off, and he sold his only real asset, his horse, to pay off Ohana's fake debt. In order to keep the money flowing, he needed to do something, and fast. And of course, he turned to crime. Iwabuchi found a buyer for the horse he no longer had, and managed to convince the man to pay him 80 yen in advance, without even seeing the horse. He then lavished all of that money on Oke, a young woman who was not especially liked around the village, and had a reputation for being rather free with her attentions towards men. There were even rumors that she was actually married to a 25-year-old man named Sugawara, who, at the end of the day, was her true love. Iwabuchi and Oke's relationship was no secret in the village, and many feared that he was about to be duped once again. Iwabuchi had a kind heart, was a hard worker, and always lent a hand to anyone in need, yet his weakness was women, and he just couldn't say no. They seemed to push him to act against his better judgment and create problem after problem that could have so easily have been avoided by just saying no. And sadly, the villagers' fears came true. On June 25th, 1926, Iwabuchi stumbled upon Oke in the arms of Sugawara, and something inside him snapped. He attacked the couple, beating Oke in a fit of rage while Sugawara escaped. Police arrived and Oke managed to escape with her life, but despite the beating she took, police let Iwabuchi off easy. He was well liked around town after all, and was otherwise known as a kind and generous man. The rumors of Oke were also widely known, and they hoped, perhaps, that matters would simply end there. They did not. Iwabuchi was so blind with rage that he threatened to anyone who would listen that he was going to kill Sugawara. Sugawara's father so feared that he might actually go through with his threats that he went to the police. But nothing would calm him down. On the contrary, this only made him angrier, and he turned that rage towards Sugawara's father for trying to interfere as well. Roughly 2 weeks later, on July 7th, Iwabuchi finally decided to move. He kidnapped Oke from the family farm she was working on and locked her up for roughly half the day, questioning her about Sugawara and her intentions towards both men. When her father noticed her missing, he went looking and found Iwabuchi standing over her with a kitchen knife. The police were once again called, But this time they were unwilling to overlook matters. Iwabuchi was arrested. He was charged with threatening Sugawara, assaulting Oke, and fraud for selling a horse that didn't actually exist. His life was falling down all around him, and all because of his fondness for women. Iwabuchi was sentenced to 3 months prison, suspended, meaning he was free right away. The reason his sentence was so light was because one of Iwabuchi's former employers had risen to prefectural assembly member, and because of his fondness for the kind man he knew back then, he called in a few favors to ensure a light sentence. This would prove to be a fatal mistake. On August 6th, Iwabuchi went to visit his former employer, and the pair got to drinking. The man persuaded Iwabuchi to let bygones be bygones, and to seal the deal, he should visit Oke to deliver an apology to her in person. Iwabuchi agreed. 2 weeks later, on August 20th, Iwabuchi went to visit Oke and delivered his apology in person to the fearful young woman. Seeing perhaps some actual sincerity in him, she invited him in for a few drinks to bury the hatchet. However, as they were drinking, the man himself showed up, Sugawara. Also fearful for his own life, Sugawara was about to flee when Iwabuchi stopped him. He invited him in to share a drink as well. Whatever happened was in the past. It was all behind them now. But as the night wore on and the trio got drunker, lips also started to loosen. Sugawara started talking about how his relationship with Oke was growing even deeper after all that happened. And this, it seemed, tipped Iwabuchi over the edge again, as though they were flaunting it right in front of his face. As soon as he left, they would be naked and in each other's arms. The idea enraged him. Iwabuchi threw the sake in his hand and attacked Oke. He dragged her around the room, hitting her numerous times and causing a loud commotion. He then pulled her outside into the garden and started hitting her with some of the wood piled up there. Oke's grandmother, 68, heard her screams and rushed to see what all the fuss was about, only to find the much stronger Iwabuchi beating her granddaughter. She valiantly tried to free her grandchild from the violent man's clutches, but it was no use, and she herself was knocked unconscious and tossed aside, before Iwabuchi finally took Oke's life. He then remembered Sugawara, but the man had fled. He ran to a nearby house for help, and Iwabuchi set out after him, fully intending to end him as well. Yet he was unable to find Sugawara, and in this state of rage, all those who had wronged him suddenly popped into mind. Ohana, the inn owners, and the variety store owner, Sugawara's father, and the police who arrested him. In a blind rage, Iwabuchi intended to get rid of them all. First stop was Sugawara's father's house. When he arrived, Iwabuchi doused the house in oil and then lit it up. Considering that all houses were made of wood at the time, it quickly went up in flames and the fire department was alerted. Yet when they rushed the scene, they found Iwabuchi still there and defending the fire with a hoe. He refused to let anyone put it out, screaming that they should all burn. Luckily, the family were able to escape with their lives, but they still lost their home, and it took numerous men to restrain the incredibly strong and violent Iwabuchi long enough to finally get inside. Yet, Iwabuchi shook them off, and then moved on to his next target. He wasn't yet done. Next stop, the officers who arrested him. But the station was empty, perhaps because everyone was dealing with the fire he had just lit, and so he grabbed a saber from inside and set out again. His next stop after that, the variety store owner, who had initially denied him visits with Ohana. Unfortunately for the owner, he was just on his way out as Iwabuchi arrived, and before he even knew what was happening, he took a saber to the chest, becoming Iwabuchi's second victim for the night. Iwabuchi returned home with the bloody saber after this, telling his wife about everything that had happened. A nearby police officer happened to hear the noise and went over to arrest him, but was injured in the struggle, unable to overpower the incredibly strong man. More police were on the way, however, and when Iwabuchi realized he was likely about to be detained, he took off into the mountains. A massive search party was organized to find him, consisting not just of police, but the fire brigade as well. For several weeks, Iwabuchi remained hidden as a large-scale manhunt was underway. Reportedly, over 36,000 police officers were mobilized in the hunt to find him, as well as 20,000 additional helpers from the fire brigade and various youth organizations. And yet, they struggled, because public opinion was actually on Iwabuchi's side. Yes, the man had killed 2 people in cold blood, burnt down a house, and injured numerous others. But most people were not witness to that. They only knew Iwabuchi as a kind, hard-working man. And the general view of police at the time wasn't so kind either. They were seen as weak and corrupt. So, when Iwabuchi then killed 2 officers during his period in the mountains, well, more people cheered than not. In fact, while he was on the run, numerous villagers didn't just help hide where he was. They even prepared meals for him, lied to police, and provided false information to throw them off his trail. Many even provided him with a place to sleep for the night, although he was on the run during late summer, early autumn, so the weather outside wasn't too harsh. Of course, it wasn't long until the press caught wind of a murderer hiding in the mountains that had over 50,000 people looking for him. The village was flocked with reporters, and the story became a sensation countrywide. And as the story continued to spread, the village itself became somewhat of a tourist destination, with people coming from all over to visit the scene of the crime, so to speak. Numerous businesses reported a large uptake in profit during the time Iwabuchi was on the run, and it was all thanks to people coming to see the story for themselves. At first, newspapers referred to Iwabuchi as Oni Kuma, a play on the words Oni, or demon, and Kuma, part of his name but also the same word for bear. However, as more and more time passed, media began to refer to him as Kuma-san more and more. A man who had murdered 4, including 2 police officers, was being politely referred to as San by the media. Yes, a great deal of the public, for whatever reason, was on this killer's side. One reporter from the Tokyo Nichi Nichi newspaper was even able to secure an interview with Iwabuchi while he was on the run, thanks to a little wrangling from the villagers. It was, of course, kept secret from the police. At this point, the reporter, Iwabuchi's own brother, and several other people of importance urged him to finally turn himself in. He couldn't stay on the run forever, and the cold winter months would soon be rolling in. Yet Iwabuchi refused. Instead, he told the reporter he wished to die on his own terms, but before then, he'd like to leave behind a few words for the villagers who had helped him and express his gratitude towards them. It seemed that during his time on the run, Iwabuchi realized it couldn't last forever, and so he decided that death was the only way out. He refused to turn himself into the police, so there was no other option. The interview took place on September 26th, and Iwabuchi decided to take action 3 days later. On September 29th, he tried to end matters but failed. As such, the following day, he asked his brother and the villagers for some help. He asked them to procure an alkaloid often used in pesticides. The villagers did as he asked, and on September 30th, Iwabuchi visited the graves of his ancestors, ate a final meal, and in the presence of several villagers, reporters, and his brother, ended matters. The events that started on August 20th finally came to an end with Iwabuchi's death on September 30th. But that still wasn't the end of the story. It soon came to light that the villagers had been helping him hide, and that reporters had met him as well. Questions were raised as to whether it was okay that numerous people had helped him while on the run from police, and as a result, the reporter and several villagers were put on trial. On February 7th, 1927, 3 villagers received 3 to 6 month suspended sentences for helping Iwabuchi end matters, but those who had merely helped him hide while on the run weren't charged. And so, the saga of Onikuma, the demon bear, finally came to an end. 4 lives were lost, many more injured, and in the end, Iwabuchi died as well. Over the years, his sensational story has been turned into songs, plays, novels, and even TV dramas, ensuring that even close to a century later, people are still aware of the events that went down in an otherwise sleepy village that ended up shaking the nation. But what did you guys think of this one? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.